September 25th, 2017. It's 7 o'clock p.m. This is a regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. We're going to call the meeting to order, and all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda in front of them. Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes from our September 11th, 2017 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 5 through 10. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? John.
I have a question in the bottom of page 5, the last paragraph. It says, Councilmember Brand expressed his belief that the city's fees, which have not been a substantial increase in number of years, which he believes had not been substantially increased, should be in there, because it's not a statement of fact. They're looked at every year. Some are changed frequently, some are changed infrequently, but they're looked at every year. So if you could insert which he believes have not been.
But are we questioning that's his
No,
belief?
that's his belief. Yes, that's what
Yeah.
it should say. It should be, it's his belief they have not been substantially increased.
Okay, I guess I'm missing your point, because that's what it says.
No, not really.
Not really.
Expressed
He
his
believes they
belief.
haven't been substantial, it's not a widely held belief, he believes they have not been substantially increased.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe John is indicating there are two different beliefs. The first one is Councilmember Brand expressed his belief that fees should have increases relative to those experienced by other businesses. And then there's a clause in the middle about fees having not been substantially increased. That, John is indicating, is also a personal opinion. So there would be two different places to recognize individual beliefs. That's, I think, what Councilmember Kwame
Yes.
is trying to
Is
say.
that what you're trying to say? Okay, well, I read it that way, but.
I'm just translating.
Yes, thank you for doing the translating. That trip to China helped out.
It's good for
Anyway,
something.
any other changes or corrections? If not, with those changes, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second?
I guess. I was waiting for John to second or.
Oh,
All in favor of the minutes with those changes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next up, we have visitors. First, we'll address any visitor in the audience that would like to speak on any agenda item. Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 11 and concludes with the resolution on pages 29 and 30, and includes the following employee wage correction for Maria Corr for part-time circulation clerk for $9.79 per hour. Next up, we have some licenses. First is the temporary on-sale liquor and a temporary show license to the St. Peter Ambassadors for parking lot number 5 for 9/28/2017 to October 1, 2017. Then we have a temporary show license and a temporary soft drink license for Rock Bend Folk Festival for Minnesota Square from September 9th and September 10th, 2017. Then we have unclaimed bicycles that are going to be donated. There are 10 of them. There's a list, it should be available. Plus the regular schedule of disbursements for September 7th, 2017 through September 20th, 2017. Are there any questions or changes to the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any comments now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Pears,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Harlan,
Aye.
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 Consent agenda is approved. First up tonight, we have unfinished business, which we have the Amoresco project financing authorization.
Mayor and members, I'm here and we can tag team with Paulie if you have more specific questions, but as you know, a couple of council meetings ago, you entered into an agreement with Amoresco for an energy-saving project, and the primary issues related to that project include street lighting, changing what you have now to LEDs, some building retrofitting of lighting and envelope, door stops and sealing and all those kind of things that would increase the energy efficiency of your building. And then the major, last piece relates to your wastewater treatment plant and providing for an updated UV system that will be much more energy efficient as well. At that time, you set an opportunity for staff to continue to review and look towards financing this project. As we've indicated with you, Amoresco brought 4 or 5 different options forward, and we looked at the marketplace as well in relation to the cost of financing this. The opportunity offered through Bank of America is the lowest cost option over the life of the project. This is a lease purchase financing agreement and is provided for under Minnesota state statute. I'm happy to answer questions if you'd like. I would want to mention that the primary piece of information is the resolution that starts on page 90 that we need you to act on. Everything pages 34 through 89 are included as a part of that resolution, or at least your approval of that is included as a part of that resolution. I would mention, as Paula might mention if I give her room to say anything, would be that on page 33, pardon me, I'm flipping my pages, 33 is the simple cash flow for the project. And I would note and want you to note that as you see in the first 8 or 10 or 12 years of the project, it does not cash flow in a positive fashion. Not until about halfway through the project does it start to cash flow in a positive fashion. As we write in the memo, that is something that you need to be aware of. That's not a significant problem, but it is something that you need to be aware of, and that is part of the consistent plan that we've had, I think, from the very beginning. It's also important to note that you will be getting some rebate resources. Those rebates are being plowed back into the cash flow. And so it's not something that you're going to get some additional cash in your pocket. It's going to operate within the cash flow. And so you'll see that included as a part of the information on page 33. Your bond counsel has had a chance to look at this, and that's one of the reasons, as I mentioned at your last council meeting, why we didn't do it at that point. And so Mary Ipple from Briggs & Morgan has been your bond counsel for 20-plus years and has reviewed the documents and made changes that have been agreed to by Bank of America. Again, the information's in your packet, and the resolution starts on page 90.
Paula, do you have anything else?
Well, I can
She was
just
supposed to
add-
answer the tough questions. That's what she was here for, the tough questions.
All right.
Let me just add that this is a 20-year lease agreement that we are going with Bank of America. As Todd mentioned, we are matching, we are making even payments throughout the 20 years and not matching the savings that he indicated on page 33. The interest rate for this will be a 3.03%, and then there is also a 2% premium on any prepayments that we would have to, if we choose to make them, that we'd be paying an additional 2%, which again, we don't plan to do, but we do have an escrow agreement that is part of this resolution as well, which allows us to put the money from the Bank of America into escrow account. Once upon approval of the invoices from Amoresco by staff, we will request disbursement from those escrow funds to be paid to Amoresco. So again, the resolution's on page 90, and it authorizes the mayor and city administrator to execute the documents. We are going to be closing then on Wednesday, the 27th.
Question? Roger?
What if the payments don't equal out the escrow amount? Prices change or anything like that?
Well, we already have the contract with Amoresco. There's be positives and negatives. If there is funds that are in deficit, the city will have to come up with those funds to make the agreements whole. The Bank of America isn't going to fund it or anything. If it comes back and we're under the 2.650, the amount remaining in the escrow account will then get paid to pay down the debt that we have.
Okay. If that happens, are we still penalized?
No.
Okay.
questions? 3.03%?
3.03.
There are no other questions at this time. The resolution authorizing execution and delivery of the lease purchase agreement and its financing appears on pages 90, 91, and 92. Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
Second.
Any questions, comments at this point? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Aye.
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 Resolution passes. Next up, we have the task force membership. Thank you. And Chief is here to see us tonight.
That would be me. Thank you, Mayor. This is on page, help me, 73 of your packet, I guess.
93, Chief, but
93,
my
sorry.
penmanship might not be so clear on the bottom
Oh,
without
that's
our
your
glasses. I'm
handwriting,
just saying.
Mr. Pravke. That makes sense. Barbara always uses big numbers. Here you have two resolutions. One is for the Drug Task Force Joint Powers Agreement. The second one is our Computer Consortium. I'll talk broadly about a Joint Powers Agreement first, and then we can kind of hit both of them separately. Joint Powers Agreement is a best government business practice when multiple jurisdictions get together to work on one project, basically. In this case, a task force in the Drug Task Force case, or our Computer Consortium is the other case. The reason is to really formalize what we do as a group. It also provides that a board makes decisions based on that joint powers agreement. So that's why I come to you with joint powers agreements. As to the Drug Task Force Joint Powers Agreement, the reason this has come to you is because we have a new member into the Joint Powers Agreement, that of Fairmont. And so because Fairmont will be part of the Drug Task Force now, we need to, of course, alter the Joint Powers Agreement. Basically, it's the same Joint Powers Agreements you have seen in the past. We renew these things periodically to meet the requirements of our grant from the state of Minnesota. So that's the first one. If you have any questions, concerns about that, I can certainly answer them. As you see at the top of the Joint Powers Agreement, it lists all the agencies involved. I know that at the council workshop, the question was asked, well, are smaller communities in, say, Blue Earth County, are they covered? And yes, they are dealt with Blue Earth County, and I don't know what that relationship is, but they are not excluded from the jurisdiction of the Drug Task Force. I mean, they often will do cases and support smaller jurisdictions. So I know that was one question in regard to that. As I said, the only change really is Fairmont in the Drug Task Force case.
So you're happy with the way this has gone, this joint powers, and the way the Drug Task Force has worked over the?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact,
We've been in it for a long time.
We've been in it since 1999. I've had, there really are only, kind of dating myself, but myself and Sheriff Peterson in Blue Earth County are the only two remaining kind of original plank holder members. We've discussed this. I think what's really important about both of these entities, if we can call them an entity, is I often say, and I press upon my boss this, but there's really no partnership without the sharing of risks, responsibility, accountability, and then the benefits. And when I talk to Sheriff Peterson, I think we're pretty proud that we've been able to maintain that with all these jurisdictions for as long as we have.
With the extensive turnover of all the people involved from the various jurisdictions, it's very positive that they have all all chosen to remain.
Correct. And for a short period of time, Fairmont chose to leave, but now they're back. I think they really have realized the importance of being a member, and it really is a value-added commodity to their community too.
From here down to Fairmont, it involves almost all the jurisdictions, involves all the jurisdictions. But really, there's nobody who has chosen not to join and not to stay in.
Correct.
That's a very positive vote of confidence.
So that's the first resolution, Mayor, that I would ask you to vote on.
Okay. Jeff?
Since we're talking about the subject of, drug cases and that sort of thing, could you kind of elaborate a little bit on, in St. Peter, how many of these cases with the task force we see in a typical year?
Well, I can't tell you how many necessarily in St. Peter, and for a couple reasons. Really, from more of a pragmatic standpoint, it would be easy for one jurisdiction to complain about another jurisdiction getting more of their time, as an example, than someone else. So what they do is they're a separate entity. And so they keep track of the cases they work as one entity. So typically has been the case over the last, at least 3 years, they see about 160 cases a year in the entire task force area. Now, one year we may see more of those cases. Another year we may not. But people who are dealing in drugs, they don't follow boundaries and borders and that sort of thing. So typically it's roughly 160 cases a year. That's somewhere over 100 search warrants. They look at they break their statistics out in the number of first-degree drug cases, second-degree to fifth-degree drug cases, and the amount of drugs they're seizing. Anywhere from 800 grams of methamphetamine to prescription dosage units. All of those statistics, if you will, are maintained by the task force and reported on to the Violent Crime Council, which they ultimately report to. And frankly, because they have such good numbers, it's why we maintain our state funding also. So it's there's more work than we have agents to do it, frankly.
And what types of substances are we seeing more of? Is there a trend these days?
I don't think that what we're seeing, and I can't speak for the task force commander, but I'm obviously a member of the board, lots of methamphetamine, cocaine, marijuana, and fortunately we see so far few heroin cases. Now I think that in my experience is pretty typical. Methamphetamine still remains I'll call it a rural drug, as it has been historically. Heroin has tended to be a very urban drug. Now, do we see heroin cases? Certainly. We in St. Peter have had heroin overdoses. But so far, we're fortunate compared to the urban areas of our state in heroin cases. And they see also prescription cases. They also will investigate diversion cases, which are cases in which a employee of a healthcare facility, for instance, may divert drugs to their own possession. And they have, and I'm sure you've all seen those in the newspaper, where an employee, a nurse, or some healthcare employee has done that. So they work all those types of cases.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? The resolution authorizing reauthorizing St. Peter Police Department participation in the Minnesota River Valley Drug Task Force. Appears on pages 101 and 102. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Garland.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Clement.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Next, we have the consortium agreement.
And thank you, Mary. My memo is on page 103. We have been a member of the Computer Consortium, which you see a joint powers agreement here for that. The reason, we've been a member of this since 2000 formally. And our Computer Consortium, not recently, but certainly when we started this, it was a very unique system. It was publicized and written about in national publications because police agencies just hadn't done this. But we felt we were really in a good position to do it, much of it based on our working relationship already in the Drug Task Force. So we had lots of people that trusted each other, which is important to partnerships. So we joined all these jurisdictions to form this computer consortium where we're basically all on the same system. It's pretty unique, and again, it's something that's been maintained since the year 2000. If you all remember what was happening in 2000, it was the great, you know, the world was going to explode because of Y2K. So it was an intense time, frankly, and because we knew that we had to do something with our computer systems, all of us, and it was expensive. You know, a couple of council members remember this. It's probably, you know, I say this tongue-in-cheek, to the Public Works Department, this is nothing. But I think at the time we joined in the consortium, it was about $85,000. Peanuts to a public works project. But overall, the consortium and the system that we purchased at the time was about $1 million. And it took all those agencies to really put it together. And we're still going quite strongly, which is, again, I think it's pretty amazing. I think the reason we have is because as part of the fee we pay to be a member, that also goes into, because we have a joint powers and can do this as a separate entity, we can budget for future needs, whether it be a server, whether it be an upgrade, and that has worked very well. It's a little more difficult to do that, as you know, as a council, to save money for some future need. So that's been a great benefit also. The other thing that's important for us is the vendor we've had since the beginning. We have not changed vendors. And there's been really, over that period of time, that 17 years, I can think of very little discussion about even abandoning our current vendor because they've been so important to our partnership in providing updates when we need them, changes if one jurisdiction sits down at a meeting and says, can we do this? So it's been very successful. The reason you're seeing this particular joint powers agreement and resolution is because the city of Mankato is no longer the fiscal agent. Blue Earth County has taken over those responsibilities. So of course we need to have this joint powers agreement in place.
Questions? John?
So we are in it, and Mankato and Blue Earth County, and Waseca County, and Faribault and Martin County, Fairmont.
Correct.
So how do we communicate with with our neighbors who are not in it? LeSueur County is not in it, Nicollet County is not in it.
We call them on the phone.
I see. In the state of Minnesota ever talked about having a statewide, we could all talk to one another?
That was my thought.
What the state has tried to do from a computer standpoint, this isn't a radio system, it's a computer system, is to do some type of pointer system. And trust me, I'm not a computer technology person.
I
However,
wouldn't ask a computer technology person because I wouldn't understand the answer. So Roger, keep your mouth shut. But that's why I ask you.
Right, and so what they've tried to do is possibly come up with a pointer system where you could enter information, it would point you to a jurisdiction that may have that information on a computer. But that really has gone nowhere. The state, because it's so big and such a complex problem, just has not been able to kind of get their arms around it as far as different jurisdictions. You have metro jurisdictions that do it one way or want something, and other jurisdictions that don't. It's very difficult, and it's why we're proud of this system. We were able to get everybody really on the same page and say, are our needs very similar, and can we make this work? Why other jurisdictions aren't in it or haven't joined, well, that's really more of a question for them than me. But from my perspective, the state really hasn't grappled with this. The federal government is forcing us to do some things in regard to more record keeping than necessarily anything else, but now they're forcing the states to move to what's called NIBRS. Now NIBRS has been around for, it's been in the thought process and from the feds since, well, for probably 25 years I've heard NIBRS, which NIBRS is an acronym for National Incident-Based Reporting System. And that's starting to come to fruition now. So that may change a little bit of how we're able to do this, but what they're trying to do is get states to report the same statistically, because one state may define one thing different than another state. The difficult part for all these vendors, if you will, for software in Minnesota is our state has so many different codes for various activities that police do. A lot of vendors don't want to play here because that's a lot of work for them. So CIS, our vendor here, is willing to take that on, and so far we've been successful doing it.
Anyone
That-
else?
Yeah, I think one system to serve everyone sounds pretty good, but practically I don't know if it would work, if it would solve
Well,
everyone's
once
needs.
the systems communicating with one another would be a big improvement.
A big improvement, and the state has been working on that and is trying to do that.
Anyone else? The resolution authorizing police record system joint powers agreement appears on page 113. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Gorman.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Paris.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Clayton.
Thanks
Aye.
for tripping me up.
Resolution passes. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Next up, we have the request for assistance for Oktoberfest.
Mayor, members, this is the request for Oktoberfest. It's very similar, substantially similar to what you've seen in previous years from the ambassadors for this event that will be held in parking lot number 5. It includes the use of parking lot number 5 and a portion of Grace Street from 169 to the alley in that block. And they're required to provide the appropriate amount of insurance, the appropriate kind of licensing, control of the area, which they do through fencing, and just a number of other things. One of the things that we do is we help with scheduling police reserves, which they're obligated to pay for. You allow them to play music until 11 o'clock for the event, and you allow activities to start really on the 28th for setup, and allow them to take down on the Sunday, which is October 1st, and to be clear of the area by 3 p.m. Those are the, I think, biggest issues related to Oktoberfest. I can't tell you what year it is exactly for Oktoberfest, but I can tell you that they're hoping for great weather because that always makes the event better.
Must be number 6, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Susan?
Todd, I believe they're planning on still having the children's parade on Saturday.
They are, but they view that a little bit differently than going down Third Street. But yes, they part of what they've tried to do over the last few years is make it a more family-friendly environment and activity, certainly during those late afternoon to early evening hours.
Do they need any city assistance for the parade?
No, they do not.
Okay. I know in the past, I feel like I've seen fire trucks and police vehicles present at that parade. Is that still intended to be the case?
I can't speak to whether they've been there in the past, but if they do need that assistance, when we can, we are happy to provide that assistance.
Okay, but that wouldn't need to be part of this contract?
Um,
It would be nice to have, but we can make it work
We
otherwise?
can make it work without.
Sounds fine.
Any other questions? The resolution approving city assistance for St. Peter Ambassadors Oktoberfest event appears on pages 117 and 118. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second?
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Kwame,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Carmen,
Aye.
Mayor Z.
Aye. Resolution passes. Next, we have another request for city assistance for the Haunted Hayride Snowmobile Show.
So, Mayor, members, this is in some ways very similar to what you've seen in the past from the Trails Association related to the Haunted Hayride for a couple of years here at the Mill Pond. And so that's all really similar to what you've seen in the past. They're continuing to expand little by little with some more activities and some more concessions and those type of things. The addition this time is doing a snowmobile show associated with this. And this too would be not the hayride. The hayride would continue at the Mill Pond. But the snowmobile show would occur in the area of Gray Street, again from 169 to that mid-block alley. Display folks would haul their cool snowmobiles in and park in parking lot number 5 for display and a show. Not a swap meet, but a show of classic and customized and other cool sleds, as they would call them, during this time. It's a wonderful opportunity for these events to combine. Certainly both are sponsored by the Trails Association, and so they've made that part of the overall request. The normal things kind of apply. They have to make sure that they pick up after one another. One of the things for the hayride is that the folks who are organizing the hayride and kind of the scary trail that they have to provide and make a good attempt to knock on doors or provide information to property owners that are abutting that along Front Street. Those would be homes on the east side of Front Street to make sure that, well, if it's 9 o'clock at night and you hear screaming kind of in the backyard, it's because of the haunted hayride, not from something else. And so we want to make sure that people understand that that's going on. They're also required to provide the appropriate amount of insurance, which is $1.5 million. They've done a great job and will continue to provide staircase and railings and a ramp so folks can get on the hayride or the hay racks. They've done a great job in providing the appropriate kind of safety equipment in relation to the trail ride and hay racks and use of fire retardants and extinguishers and waters and all those kind of things. So that's been really great. As their event has continued to grow, they've provided more porta potties, and we want to make sure, of course, that they have accessible porta potties. And the St. Peter Police Department would maintain the ability to shut it off if we have some type of problem or some type of safety issue going forward. The resolution is included in your packet, and that resolution starts on page
126.
126. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Questions? Susie?
This is a really cool event, so I have one little criticism, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm critical of the event overall. I know in the past, I think I had talked to Todd a little bit about it. I'm curious about exactly where the decorations for this event go and how far into Mill Pond Park some of those are permitted to be, or if there's a line drawn somewhere along that way.
There is a line drawn in that, and I hope it will be defined better than it has been in past years. So I look at that issue from two perspectives. One of which is where does the trail go and how far does it go south of that area? But I think what you're concerned about, and it's mentioned, is that that park is still available for use, and use by toddlers who might be more scared if a skeleton is hanging out there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when they just want to get to the teeter-totter or the jungle gym. And so I've had discussion with the folks about that, and I hope that that will be handled differently this year than it has in past years.
Perfect. Like I said, overall, I think it's a fantastic event, and I'm excited to participate again, so, great.
Any other questions? Todd, I remember in previous years, wasn't there a conflict with some other event going on down there at the same time? Wasn't it Paws Walk? That's been taken care of? Okay. Thought I read it somewhere, but I couldn't remember the dates. Okay. Any other questions?
Again, just to mention that this, the hayride would be a couple of weekends, and snowmobile show would just be one weekend.
The resolution approving request for city assistance for Nicollet County Trails Association Haunted Hayrides and Vintage Snowmobile Show appears on pages 126 and 127. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Paris,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin,
Aye.
Mayor Seaman,
Aye.
Councilmember Connell.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Next up, we have the hospital expansion project budget modification, and Mr. George is here.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for this opportunity to talk to you about increasing the project budget for the hospital expansion and renovation project. As you can see from the memo, we're asking to increase the project budget by $2.55 million. As we went through the process of schematic design and evaluating each space and the equipment contained therein, we came back with a total exceeding our budget. As we valued each of those spaces, we reduced over $2 million of that development, but are recommending that we increase the budget by $2,550,000 because these items are critical and were not anticipated at the time that we had our master facility plan done and our initial cost estimate. You'll see in the memo those things that really drove that increase, and I'll talk about them briefly. We want to expand the space in the emergency department, adding a behavioral or psychiatric observation holding space and additional treatment rooms. We wanted to increase the ambulance garage from 1 stall to 2, so that both of our vehicles could be in the adjacent ambulance garage. Currently, one is in a separate building. We add the ambulance crew quarters. When we were doing our initial facility plan, it was prior to when we had entered into the agreement with Alina that requires crew quarters now, as crew are on in the facility, 12-hour shifts, 24/7. We increased the height of the main lobby area to make it a prominent point of entry for the facility as we move to a single point of entry in a different location for what our community will know initially. We replace our rooftop units. Initially, we had looked at replacing just the very problematic rooftop unit in surgery, which I've spoke to you about in the past, but to replace all of them, and I have to double check my numbers, but I think there's 7 or 8 total. They're getting towards the end of their life, and I can tell you that we had a rooftop unit that was down and out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it was the one that was controlling our central server room, and yeah, the spaces got up into the 90s. We do look at replacing them with a better quality rooftop unit that is more engineered for the specific space that it's serving. We also look to increase our emergency power, so that air conditioning is covered in those areas where patients are. Today, if we had a power outage, the patient rooms and treatment rooms and surgery would probably get pretty hot if it was for an extended period of time in the summer, causing us to have to evacuate those folks or consider that if we couldn't find another way of mitigating high temperatures. We do look at providing radiant heat that will be directed down against the windows in the patient rooms. And this really is a significant comfort factor that takes the chill that the glass radiates into the room. We typically have couches and chairs for the family and visitors in those areas, and we found that to be a very useful and important feature. And then we also hadn't anticipated the entrance, having to change the entrance to the city park so it would align with the new location of the hospital entrance. Lots of benefits come from all of these items, as you can see listed on page 129. The community is going to benefit hugely, so will the facility. You know, the central entrance will become more convenient. We move to a totally level parking lot, which reduces or eliminates, it truly eliminates the steep slope, which is a trip hazard or just a transport hazard coming into the hospital. And then we expand treatment areas in the emergency department, surgery, and therapy areas, which are all critically taxed today and have had their bottlenecks for the services that we provide. We anticipate becoming busier in the future. And I can tell you with strong confidence, we will become busier in the future on projects that we're working on right now, that we probably will be doing a formal announcement in the near future. These spaces are perfectly in line with what we see coming for the future. We also add the food service, which I believe we've talked about in the past. That'll provide in-house control and availability of food preparation and service to both our patients, staff, and visitors. I had an interesting question in a workshop that I've been thinking about for a bit from Councilman Grams. And he asked if I had completed the ROI on food service, and I told him no. But what I didn't tell him is because food service always loses money in a hospital, and it is a true expense center, and it is our challenge to control that expense and keep it as low as possible. But that's, I process latently sometimes, and 15 minutes later I could have told him that answer, but I wish he was here to hear it, but he can see the minutes. You also see the square footage impact. The hospital is currently 60,000 square feet. We're renovating 40,000 square feet and adding just over 33,000 square feet. This recommendation, which comes from management and is forwarded to you, recommended to you from the Hospital Commission, is that the $2,550,000 comes from the cash of the hospital's reserves. And not from the city or the taxpayers. And that the debt that we established through our debt capacity study about a year ago now, I'd have to look at the dates, remains the same and is unchanged. And I think that's an important fact to point out. We also evaluated the impact to our cash flow, and I believe, in my opinion, it's an acceptable risk. We'll draw down to we're projecting $8.5 million and bump right back up to over $10 million the following year. Currently, we're at just over $10 million and anticipate to come in around 12 this year. Questions?
Anyone? I know we talked about this in detail more workshop, so.
Just as a point of clarification, the reason that this comes before the council is because ultimately you're owners of the building. And so you would set the budget. It's also part of the process for USDA, as you would be the entity that would be responsible for this. The hospital funds would pay all of the debt.
Yes, and I think it is important again to stress a point made in the memo. We're asking you to change the project budget. That's all. There's many more steps of approval as we move through our application process with the USDA. We're not, this is not authorizing the project to move forward. This just helps us set that target so that we can design in detail to this number.
Roger?
Forgive me, one of the things that, I'm on the hospital board, but I just thought about this with the rooftop units. Since we're making basically a full conversion, I'd like to make sure we're not getting into something proprietary. where we have to call their service guy or anything like that, something that's, doesn't lock us into high parts and high maintenance cost. I don't know if that's been talked about with these.
I have not been in that discussion yet. I know the rooftop units that we're considering will be designed specifically for the space, as opposed to a 200K or 4-ton or 20-ton unit. But that's a good point, and I'll carry that forward. In fact, I'll be meeting with our owner's rep later this week.
Awesome, thanks.
Anyone else? The resolution approving modified budget for the 2018 Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic Expansion Project appears on page 132. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Curley.
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler.
Aye.
Councilmember Coleman.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a City School District 508 roadway agreement. Todd?
Mayor and members, the information starts on page 133. You've talked about this on a number of occasions. This relates to the work that has gone on County State Aid 5, or some people know it as the Fort Road, or you might know it as Broadway Avenue. So this is the area near the high school, essentially from Sunrise Drive to Highway, or Township Road 361 on the west. Included in your packet was an image, and I'll show it up on the board here, hopefully. Oh. And so this kind of shows the area that we are discussing and how things were divided. This agreement was first forwarded and suggested to the school district shortly after you entered into a very similar agreement with Nicollet County for share. And although this isn't exactly right, in general terms, this would be the school district paying for about 25% of the roundabout. Again, not exactly right, because there's varying levels of cement, but essentially 25%. And also a 70% share of the turn lane that would turn from Broadway Avenue to the north on Township 361. The financial deal looks kind of like this. The school would pay a not to exceed amount of $485,000. We're very comfortable with that number based on the bid prices that were put forward and brought forward by Seth and the county, Nicollet County, Seth, the county engineer there. They would have to come up with cash after forgiving the contract for deed or the debt service that you have on property at Traverse Green. And so the numbers that you see in your packet are approximately right. Until closing, the numbers could change based on whether you sell a lot or two or how that all fits together, but these are essentially the numbers. So there's about $200,000+ that would come from forgiveness of the debt on Traverse Green, and the remaining sum would come from cash that the school district would pay to you at the time that we close on this agreement. The school district has already taken action on this agreement at their last meeting a little while ago, and so they are in agreement with this, and the resolution providing for the mayor and the city administrator to enter into this agreement is in your packet as well. And so that agreement is on, or the resolution is, usually the mayor beats me to that one.
152.
There you go, 152. I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Like you'd mentioned, we've discussed this many times, and nice to see it finally getting completed. Roger?
I keep hearing good things in the public about the roundabout there, which, we've had discussions about roundabouts before.
It's not such a new thing anymore, is it? 5 years ago, 10 years ago in our area, 7 years ago, it's probably a pretty far out thing, but not so far out anymore.
Yeah, so I was just surprised to see that.
Yeah, I do have to say that the interconnection with the old Gardner Road and Jefferson Avenue is getting into, that maybe there's just a few punch list items left, very few things, but how that's all worked together and the planning that a subcommittee of the council and the school board worked on, I don't know, forgive me, a couple of you were on that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, is really kind of coming to fruition, and it's amazing to kind of see it all fit together, and it seems like it's working well. And not just from a roadway perspective, but from a housing perspective and a development perspective and a financing perspective.
The Roger, your comment about the roundabout, I think a lot of it is application, and I just can't imagine accessing that, the high school in that area now without having a roundabout there. It just, be really dangerous, I think. Any other comments or questions? John?
The $200,000 cash we received from the school district, we're intending to put into the permanent improvement fund.
That is correct, that is in
Is that what it's called, the PI,
PIR fund.
permanent?
Oh, I don't know. Paula, PIR stands for, help me out, PIR.
Permanent improvement revolving.
There you go.
Permanent improvement and revolving fund, then it becomes a plaything of the council with our varying competing ideas and projects on capital improvements in the community.
As I mentioned in the memo, although I didn't quite say a plaything of the council, I mean, certainly you could do something different than is anticipated with it at some point in the future. From a staff perspective, our goal would be to hold on to that for a little bit, as we're gonna likely need some resources related to township and the development of Township 361. But certainly that is something you could do and make a decision on later. This doesn't specifically define the purpose for the money beyond it going to the PIR fund and beyond the recommendation of the city administrator to hold on to it for that future possible purpose.
Mr. Kwame, the answer is no.
So we can save money too and put it away? And
Well,
that's-
I think you can for maybe a little bit, but certainly our goal with 361 would be to try and make something happen in
All right,
the
yeah,
less distant future. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? The resolution authorizing the cooperative construction agreement between the school district and the city appears on page 152. Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin,
Aye.
Mayor Seaman,
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Rivers.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Last item under new business is the MVAC lease renewal. Todd?
Mayor, members, this lease is substantially similar to the other ones that you've put in place with daycares and the school district over the last 6 to 8 months for space that they utilize and lease within the community center. MVAC leases 2 primary areas on what I would call the main floor. Some people would call it the second floor, or the floor where the gymnasium is. They have some office space, and I show it on the map here or on the overhead here. There's also an indication of that space within your packet. They also have some space downstairs on the lower level where all the daycares are located, and they've had that space since the beginning, since the building started use, and that's for their Head Start program. So those are the 2 spaces we're talking about. It's not an expansion or a reduction in their space. The lease here would be through the end of 2019, so for a couple of years. And the lease amount, again, is substantially similar to what you've seen on a per square foot basis for all those areas that haven't been discounted for some other reason. And it anticipates a 2% rate increase each year of the contract or the lease agreement. Other information is included in your packet, including a copy of the lease and the resolutions on page 193.
Questions? Suzie?
I don't know if this has been covered recently or if we've talked about this recently. I don't recall that we have. When we were dealing with other space issues on the ground floor here in the past year, we had pondered at one point if there was a way to find space to consolidate them with some of the school district's programming, with the thinking that Head Start fits in very well with some of the ECFE classes and so forth. I'm assuming you did, but did you consult with the school district and see if there was space available at the former high school, current middle school, or if there's a way to integrate them there?
Yes. And so there was some discussion about that. However, with the nature of the programs, the funding sources of the programs, and I think, I don't want to speak for Superintendent Peterson, nor do I want to speak for the school board, but with their planned continuing increase in numbers, they want to be very cautious about how much space they provide to others for fear that they would cramp their space needs into the future.
I'm very happy to provide space for this program, so in that sense, I'm not trying to push them out or anything along those lines, but knowing that we have tenants on that ground floor who would be more than happy for extra space. I just wanted to make sure that we had considered those sorts of alternatives along the way. So,
It's been quite some time, but that was part of the initial discussion as things were being moved about.
yeah. Okay, sounds good. We're happy to continue to host them, so no problems there.
Anyone else? The resolution authorizing execution of a renewal lease for rooms at the community center with Minnesota Valley Action Council appears on page 193. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Other comments or questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Carley.
Aye.
Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Resolution passes. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports. Last Thursday, I went down for a little while to the Senior Expo. Is that what we're calling it? Senior Expo. Boomer. The
Boomer and
Beyond
Beyond.
Expo. There we go. And, wow, people everywhere. And maybe it's that expanding boomer generation, or maybe it was the warm weather, or whatever it was, but it was very well attended. The other thing is Oktoberfest, as was mentioned or talked about earlier this weekend. And I don't know if anyone attended, but I drove by a couple of times while the new event center in the old armory on Minnesota Avenue was being used the other night, and it was nice to see a lot of people. Looked like they didn't have an access problem. I haven't heard anything other than that, but before the event, there were people strolling up and down the streets and checking out our businesses, so you know, that was very encouraging to see them drawing people in town to take advantage of that. So that's all I need to have.
Members, I will mention, under my reports, we had a Sister City committee meeting just a few days ago, and the mayor and I were in attendance, as were folks from Gustavus and some other folks that have participated in that programming. So just wanted you to be aware that that was still ongoing. There will be likely a celebratory event, a fiesta event, that's going to happen here at the community center with the cooperation of a number of groups, but including the Sister City Committee. I can tell you for sure that the bus has not left Far, Texas yet, and we did have a phone conversation with our contact in Petitlawn to help ensure that all the paperwork is moving along, and hopefully it will move very soon. They stand ready once they get approval from the federal government in Mexico to take possession of that bus. And so, Godspeed to them. We want it to work out well for them. It was one of their priorities last time they were here to visit with us, to have that bus with that lift on it. And so, not only is the bus there, but certainly the fire gear that was transported in that bus still waits in Far, Texas for them to come and get it. I think some very good conversation on the part of the members of the Sister City Committee, including what's our long-term strategy, how does this work, what kind of impact does this have in the community, what's necessary, who can provide the horsepower to make some of these things go, and those are all really important discussions to have. I think they're important now, maybe even more so than they were in past years, because travel is becoming a little bit more of a concern to folks within the Guerrero province in Mexico, where Petitlan is located. And so there might be some changes in how we view that and how it works. But wanted to give you an update that there was still activity and a group that's very interested in continuing to participate, and we'll see how Sister City continues to move forward from that point.
But when are they tentatively planning this fiesta?
Oh,
April.
Yeah, it's April. I want to say April 4th, if I remember the date right, but
and-
I don't know that a firm date has been set.
Unless it's changed, it was April 13th,
13th.
which was a Friday.
I think. So
So
in
that
April,
committee's-
we'll have plenty of time, but April is.
Yeah, so that committee will continue to work on that project as well. I want to have Pete come forward and talk a little bit about Broadway Avenue and the Highway 169 project a little bit. So Pete, really this is my chance, and I didn't probably describe it very well in the agenda, to have you talk about how we're looking in that area in front of the Pulse and the Cross Fitness Emporium and Jake's Pizza in that area.
And we can blame you for the bridge also?
You certainly can. We'll fix that next.
It is not a City of St. Peter project, to be
Right.
serious, it is not, but we certainly have worked with DOT, and want to continue to see it move forward too, but let's talk tonight
Yeah,
about the
I'll
roadway
touch on that
project.
towards the end there, Todd. So,
Okay.
The street, the curb, the gutter, the medians have all been installed. We like how they look so far. Things are going along very well. We got a little bit of sidewalk to finish yet along the north side of the street. We hope to do some boulevard prep here yet this week. Tree planting, some median prep by staining and put a cap on there. Get some traffic paint down and get some parking areas identified. We hope that if everything goes right, early to mid next week, we should have that roadway open to traffic. When the project is complete, our plan is to open that back up to local traffic. And so, as Todd had mentioned, or John had mentioned, the MnDOT Bridge project has had a couple of issues come up there. We don't really control their timeline. It'd be nice if we could coincide the opening of the road with the bridge, but looks like we'll have our portion open, and we'll still work with MnDOT to make that happen. Street lights will hopefully go up later this week, and so you should see a little different look down there. Things are coming together. The guys were still working late tonight in the rain, trying to get some of the boulevard stuff going forward here. They expect some nice weather towards the end of the week, so it looks like things will fall together. We have a substantial completion of October 1st, and final completion by October 19th, and we anticipate being real close to both of those dates there. So,
Pete, if I can, one of the questions that I got a lot at the Boomer and Beyond Expo was, so when that opens, will I be able to drive across on Front Street from north to south?
you will.
Okay.
Yep, everything will be ready to roll there. The bridge will stay boxed off, so you won't be able to get onto the bridge apron there, but everything else should be open for business from our point of view there.
Fantastic. Mayor and members, the last
I
one.
have the question for Pete. I'm sorry, I thought he had more. That was a question I had, the median blocks that's stained, is that how we
Yep.
got the other color? Because I was wondering why they were two different colors. I didn't realize we were staining that. So-
Yeah, we're gonna do a stain. If you remember how the pillars look at the Sunrise Water Tower, those are a stained concrete, a little more durability,
Okay.
a little less expense. And so we did some matching the previous few weeks here to get a pattern of staining and how we wanna have it done. So they'll come in and they'll do a real light sandblast on the medians that are there.
Okay.
And then texture, apply some stain to the texture that's existing after the light sandblast. And we think it'll look really close to what you have right downtown.
That's what I was wondering, that.
Yep.
Because the stuff downtown, isn't that Casota stone?
That is Casota stone.
Right, okay,
Yep.
all right, okay. I was just curious about that, how that was being
Right.
handled.
Just to be clear too, the project might still have some punch order things, but our goal is to make sure that traffic can flow and pedestrians can use the sidewalks and those kind of things as quickly as we can.
Right.
Yeah. Last one that I have relates to leaf collection. And so Pete, why don't you talk a little bit about that and where we're starting, how we're starting, and how that's all gonna fit together?
Sure. What we're really doing at this junction is the brush and garden waste pickup right now. And so we're picking up from the boulevards a variety of different materials there. We really haven't started the leaf collection portion of that yet, but that'll be ongoing from mid-October until we finish completion. We're starting on the east side and working to the west. We started on Front Street. We are past Washington Avenue right now. So our overall goal is to go as far west as we can, and we come back and hit the subdivisions and pick those up in the little areas that they have there. We anticipate being done late this week, early next week with that. One of the things we experienced last year was a lot of callbacks for waste that was put back in the boulevard after we'd already been through there. And so this year we're gonna try something different. If we've already gone by and you call and we notice debris or yard and garden waste in your boulevard, we will be stopping there and talking to you about a charge to pick that back up. Because it does cost us quite a bit more to go back and individually pick up after we've already been through on the pass. And so we're gonna try something a little different. Last year, it became rather expensive to go back and make multiple trips for 1 or 2 yards out there. The waste site, the drop-off site will remain open. So if we've already been by your area, and we will update our website so you can see that, take a look there. It does not cost you to haul out to the drop-off site. And so that's what we're encouraging, and that's what we'll discuss with our customers as we deal with them here going forward.
Just to be clear, Pete, you're talking about brush pickup,
Yes, right.
in case anyone
Yep,
is listening and you're not,
Brush and garden waste,
right. Leaf pickup will take place later.
right.
And there's a different schedule of north, is this a north to
Yeah, there'll
south?
be a different schedule, we'll publish
Okay.
that, we alternate that on how we do things.
Yeah, as Barb indicated, there is information starting to trickle out and move out in the hot sheet to give people
Yep.
lots of time. We realize that very few leaves have dropped so far.
You have seen the city crews out keeping some of the storm sewers open, because they've all dropped, some have dropped and gone right to the storm sewer during the rain event.
That was my question, or point, up on Jefferson, especially the new part up there, they got those silt retention.
Yep.
It doesn't look like they're working, if
Yeah.
they're supposed to be there for any length of time. I don't know.
Well, we
They-
keep
they
them there
seem to be-
until the area is established, so it
Okay.
meets the growth
Alright.
criteria that's set in the permit. And so, they may come by and loosen or replace some of those.
Okay, because a lot of them weren't doing what they were intended to do.
So are you intending to come back to a future meeting and talk about leaf pickup?
Yes.
This one is just brush,
Yep.
okay?
Any other questions or comments? Jerry?
You mentioned the turnouts we've had in various activities that are going on in town. I happen to, it's been several years, but I happened to drive past the fairgrounds when they had the car show and swap meet. The fairgrounds was plumb full of people, and the streets were, a lot of cars parked in the street. It must have been, I don't know how many people they had, but it must have been very successful.
Anybody else have anything they need to, want to bring up?
Have we had a city-county meeting lately?
We have not.
Because I was asked by a county commissioner if it was the city dragging their feet, or if it was the county, who we should yell at. I said I would yell at the city if it were the city.
I would say that it's a partnership, so an equal amount of yelling would be
Okay.
justifiable.
Well,
at
this
both
is my
locations.
yelling at you, and I'll tell him to yell
Yeah.
at them. Okay.
Any other contributions? If not, is there a motion
So
to
moved,
adjourn?
Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.